Hello everyone, welcome to the third video about scope planning, and in this video I'm going to talk about requirements planning. So what is a requirement? A requirement is a condition or a capability that needs to be present in the product, service or result to satisfy a contract or other formally imposed specification. Okay, so what does that mean? Basically means a requirement basically means that it's something that must absolutely be present by the end of the project, something that must be there. Okay, so requirements need to be very carefully defined because they basically dictate the success of your project, right? So normally I use the SMART methodology, and I know that this is something that is used normally to set goals. I just made a small change. So requirements need to be SMART. They need to be S for specific. In other words, they need to be as precise as possible and clear. Number two, they need to be measurable. So I need to have some level of ability to measure that requirement to see if at the end of the project is present or not. All right, needs to be as well actionable. That means that there needs to be work associated with it. It needs to be something that I can assign or break down into tasks like I'm going to show later on in another video. It also needs to be realistic for obvious reasons, right? And finally, normally the T stands for time based, but actually I change it for traceable. In other words, needs to be able to be traced to a business objective or to something that is linked to the project or to a person or to a requirement by the customer and so on. Okay, so as you can see, requirements are extremely important for us to set and to be very precise when we set them. So how do you collect these requirements? How do you know the requirements of your project? Well, they are driven or they broken down from the project goals and from the objectives that you build in the charter. But these ones is the things that going to dictate the way that you basically divide your tasks later on. To obtain the requirements, you normally obtain them from the stakeholders, but you have other options. You might check business cases of projects that are similar to it. You might check problem and issue reports from previous projects as well. You might decide to do some interviews. You might decide to do some focus groups. So you have a variety of tools that really can be used. But you can also use this collection of requirements might also be affected, for example, by benchmarking or of external products or of external processes or of systems that already exist, and you might decide to collect requirements from them because you want them present on your product too or on your project too. And it's very normal, especially if you're doing progressive elaboration on certain projects. It's very normal that you might build prototypes to test them. And I don't mean prototypes only if you are building new products. It might also be prototypes for systems. So one of the tools that you might use uh, to help you manage your requirements is called the traceability matrix. And this is a very important document, especially if you're working in industries like software development or new product development. Outside of that, I haven't found it that useful for most projects that I do, but I decided to incorporate it here. So this is a grid that basically links your product requirements or your project requirements from their origin to the things that will deliver them. So for example, in this case here, I'm giving a project about a deck construction. It's something that I typically do in my class. And in this project, I tell the students, okay, I want to have a barbecue installed on this deck that I'm going to build. So the barbecue area is my business need. In this case, what would be the next column I have is solution requirement. In other words, what solutions do I have that would meet my business needs? So in order, for example, to have my barbecue area, two things. I need to have in that area fireproof wood, and I need to have installed the barbecue equipment, for example. All right, so what tests can I do? All right, so I want fireproof wood. So the test I'm going to do, for example, is select the fireproof wood. And out of that test, there's going to be a test plan. How am I going to measure how am I going to know if something is fireproof or not? For example, I'm going to buy wood that has a fireproof certification. So that's my test. So the test deliverable or the test results would be If it has the certification, then it passes, and if it doesn't, then it does not pass. Now in this case I already did it, so in this case the test result was indeed the wood that I found as a pass. I selected wood that has the fireproof certification, and therefore in my comments I wrote, okay, the wood is selected. Okay, another example, I might have a barbecue equipment. I want to install a barbecue equipment in that area, so my test requirement would be a barbecue equipment that works on gas, for example, because that's the connection I have for the project. So I might have to check for the gas installation on the barbecue equipment, and therefore how am I going to do that? How am I going to test that? Well, the deliverable should be, out of that I should get a check for my product check, in other words, that indeed my product has what I want it to have. In this case I have not conducted the test yet, so it would show empty, and this is exact. Some tests you already did, some tests you did not, but overall this is something that, if you have a lot of requirements, can really help you track them down. Another thing that we can use is called a statement of work. Now, there's two different documents that a lot of times I feel like people confuse, and to be honest, they can be confusing. So I'm going to talk in this video about one, and on the next video I will talk about the other, because they represent two very separate things. The statement of work, also known as a SOW, is a narrative description of the product, services, or results to be delivered by the project. In other words, it's a paragraph, just like if you were writing an essay, where you describe what are the results that you want from the project. Now, this is a very normal document for projects that work on contract or that work with customers, and less normal for, in my opinion, for projects where you have to do them internally on a company. So the SOW will contain all major requirements. In the SOW, you have to explain what are the deliverables, what are the scheduled milestones you might already have, and what are the review meetings that you already have planned. And the SOW may also reference some detailed requirements, specifications, and standards that you want to be present. So the statement of work is very focused on what is the results of the project, what comes out of the project. So as you can see, requirement planning is something extremely important, and it's the very first step that I do when I am planning the scope or the tasks of the project, because only by knowing what your destination is can you actually design the steps to reach that destination. And without this step, I would say that your job would become much more difficult and much higher risk for your project. Thank you very much for watching the video. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you on the next video of this mini-series.